Hey, it's Allison. Thank you so much for joining me today on this episode. I am excited because I am going to talk about this framework that I created based on the work that I've done with adults with immigrant parents or individuals with immigrant backgrounds for the past 10 years or so, plus my own personal experience being an adult and a child with immigrant parents. This framework, I really feel like encapsulates like the process of what we go through, and I honestly don't know that we'd ever get out of it completely, just because being an adult with immigrant parents, there's a lot of responsibilities, expectations, and love that we want to give back to our family and care for our family. So I don't know that it's like ever going to go away completely, but this is going to be a part of a 3-part series where this first episode I will tell you exactly what this framework is. Then we'll dive into why it's important to know, and then what we can do about it to help minimize the impact of it on our daily lives. So I am excited to share with you. This framework is called the Repay Cycle, and we'll hop right in. So if you are with me on YouTube, you can see the Repay Cycle pulled up here. If you're not, you can go ahead and go over to YouTube or check out my show notes for the images on the website. It's also listed there, so don't worry. I am also going to talk you through it. You can find the image later just so that maybe it could give you a bigger picture of like what I'm talking about. This framework came from the accumulation of clients that I've worked with, adults with immigrant parents, my own experience, and just patterns that I've seen, things that I've heard in just through living. So what I really help my clients is minimizing the impact as we move through these 4 stages. So there's 4 stages. There is awareness, repay, self-sacrifice, mixed emotions, and it all cycles back to each other. So there's 4 parts to it, and I'm going to walk you through each one individually and tell you how it all connects and all of that. And in the next episode, we'll talk about why this is important and also then what you can do about it to help minimize negative impacts on you and how you could still unlock your fullest potential, live a life that you want while also caring for your immigrant parents or your immigrant family. The first step of being in the repay cycle is this awareness from 2 sources. One, from yourself, the child who later becomes an adult, the awareness of the fact that you are born or you grew up or have more experiences in the country you are living in than your parents do. For example, for me, I was born here in the US. My parents were born in Vietnam. So their dominant language is Vietnamese. They also speak Chu Chao. They've also learned English. But their dominant language is Vietnamese. So the awareness of the fact that I got to go to school, speak English. I know more English than my parents do. I am more educated in the country that we're living in currently. So the awareness of the fact that I have all this privilege, all this education, and all these resources and tools that my parents may not have had access to is very, very clear, right? Even as a young child. The second part of this is the awareness of the parents or the family or the aunties and the uncles, whoever it is, that you are also more equipped to handle paperwork, speak to someone at schools, or, ask for this from the cashier or whatever it is, because they know that you probably are more fluent in the English language than they are. So that awareness from both parties, and in this case, we'll just go with your parents, right? You obviously could have helped other people in the family too. But the mere fact of you and your parent knowing that you have more education, more access to, resources and knowledge about the English language is very, very clear for both parties. When the child, who then later becomes an adult, is aware of that, the sense of responsibility, the habits of like stepping in and translating or taking over and doing things for the family is very, very habitual or even expected, even asked of, right? And there could be this innate desire to want to give back because they want to help their family. Generally speaking, most people don't want to see their family or loved ones, helpless if they can help. So even as a young child, this happens to a lot of adults with immigrant parents who then take on this role of caring for, doing things and all of that. And then what that leads to sometimes is also this expectation to repay. Like, hey, I have to help my parents because they sacrificed so much to get here, or they've done so much for me, or I want to give back to them because they don't have as much, or there's just some idea that they are wanting to repay, or again, the family is expecting them to repay. This is the second step where the awareness leads to repay, the act of doing. And by repay, I don't only mean financial. So when we're repaying, it could be doing things for people, translating, it could be emotional support, it could be having dream jobs that their parents wanted for them, going to the schools their parents wanted for them, or caretaking in some way. So it can be financial, but it doesn't have to be just financial. Repaying is just any act of doing something for the family or for the parents that they either felt innately that they want to do or that they felt pressured to do. I have a lot of clients who had a job that their parents wanted for themselves. Like they had this dream of becoming, a doctor or a lawyer, and then the child embodies that and wanted to, at some point, whether or not they follow through with it, do that for the parents, right? To live out their dreams. Or sometimes it could be that it's not like the parents wanted it, but it could be that the parents want this job for their kid because it's what they know to be successful. Something I've talked about in a lot of different podcasts too is that, what we know is what we know. So if our family members are very clear that doctors have a good living, lawyers make a good living, are highly regarded, all those things, right? They're going to want that for their family, generally speaking. And again, everything that I'm saying doesn't apply to everyone and everyone's situation, so it's just more general. So if our parents know that being a doctor or being a lawyer is sustainable, it helps you have a good income, it gives you prestige, they're going to want that generally for their kids to do. And if that's all they know, they're going to want to push their kids towards that sometimes, right? And sometimes the pressure of that can actually have the child want to repay and follow through with that. Or maybe they actually have an interest in the same career, and that's fine, but sometimes it could just be out of wanting to repay their parents or to live out their dreams or to make them happy. And making them happy is also part of the repay cycle. So that's stage 2. So first is awareness of you're the one that could give back, parents know you could give back and help, so then you end up doing it. You do all the things of like helping them in whichever ways that you can. The next step after repay is self-sacrifice. When we end up doing so much for other people, like, having a job or a career that our parents wanted, we may not be happy. We may not be satisfied with it. Even if a part of us really wanted it, if there was this pressure from someone else to tell us to do it, it might not really sit with us well, right? Sometimes when we get pressure from an external force telling us to do something, even if we wanted it, especially as like young children when we're going through developmental phases of like rebelling or wanting to find out our own identity, it might not sit so well with us, right? Maybe as adults we can reconcile and kind of think of like what we like, or actually we do really enjoy this job, but the fact that my parents told me to have this career, we kind of like have a bitterness towards it, or towards our parents perhaps. That could happen. But generally when we do so much for other people, right, if we're constantly putting our needs aside so that we could help our parents, help our family, like let's say I was going to go to the gym and then my mom calls and she says, come over and help me fix the TV or fix my computer, and I have to like stop myself from going to the gym. Sure, like, when it's urgent and when it's necessary, that could be something I'm willing to change up plans for. But if this happens all the time where I'm not able to say no, I'm not able to be like, hey, I can't because I already have all these other plans, and actually take care of myself, then I might start burning out. I might start sacrificing too much of my own time, my own energy, my own needs. And that would lead me to the last step, which is the mixed emotions. when we're not able to actually take care of ourselves, it leads us to feel burnout eventually, resentful, irritable. We might not actually be present with the people that we actually really care about and want to be present with, right? For example, when I first moved out, I remember this was something I talked about on a podcast for the first time back in 2022, maybe, on the codependency podcast. And I was really nervous to talk about it because I had a lot of shame, a lot of fear of like, what will people think? But anyway, when I first moved out of my parents' house, I worked in downtown LA, and I would have like an hour commute there and back, on a good day. So it was pretty tiring to sit in traffic after a long day of work. And then what I did was I stopped by my parents' house initially, like almost every day, because I felt guilty. I felt guilty for leaving. I didn't want them to think I abandoned them. I didn't want them to think that I'm not there for them anymore, or that like I forgot about them. I wanted to be there and show them that, hey, it's still the same. I'm still here. Nothing's changed, even though things changed. In the sense of like I actually just moved out. But what ended up happening was, because I was doing it out of guilt, obligation, fear, and worry, and I was so tired anyways on some days where I actually showed up and I wasn't even really engaging with anyone, right? I just showed up and was grumpy, tired. And those days I really should have just gone home. I mean, not every day was like that, and not that I didn't enjoy my time with them or anything like that. That's not what I mean. But there were moments where I should have chosen to go home, take a nap, or go to the gym, or call them instead, or do something instead, so that I didn't have all this mixed emotions for being there, of feeling guilty. Then I was feeling tired. Then I felt bad for being tired and felt bad for being grumpy. And then I felt like a worse person after showing up, even though my whole intent was to, first of all, decrease my guilt, which was, more for me. But also because I wanted to show up for them, I wanted to be there for them, but I actually wasn't anyway. So I was losing on both ends, and that wasn't helpful, and that wasn't a good time perhaps for everyone in those moments. So that's an example of how we can feel so many things, right? Where we want to show love and care, but we're tired. Then we could start feeling irritable and grumpy, and then we start feeling bad about ourselves for being grumpy or being irritable or not having a good time. And again, this is just a small example, and it's not like it happened every day, but imagine if this happened every day where I didn't know my limits. So just imagine, right? And again, this was just a small example, and it didn't happen every day, but imagine if it did. If I constantly sacrificed my needs, my energy, my time for other people because I felt bad and guilty because of this repay cycle, I'm not going to feel good. That's when resentment and burnout starts building up. Tiredness builds up, and then we're not able to be the best versions that we can. And here on this podcast, the goal is to empower you to unlock your fullest potential, right? Care for your parents, care for your family and your loved ones without always sacrificing yourself, without getting yourself to the brink of burnout and then pulling back, or feeling bad about pulling back. Or worse, a lot of my clients thought, the only way to really get back their energy and their time is to cut off the very people that they care about, which is not their goal at all. Like, the whole point of them being in this repay cycle to begin with is because they love their family and they care so much for them and want to support them. But what we need to do is to do it in a way that works for us, right? So we are in the awareness. I'm the only one that can do this. Parents also know that you're the only one that can help them. Maybe you and other siblings or other cousins and whatnot. But for the sake of this conversation, let's just say it's you. Then we move on to repay, where you do the things. You have emotional support. You spend quality time. You do paperwork for them. You translate for them. You drive them places. You do it so much so that you don't have time to take care of yourself. And you're burning out. You don't get to do the things that you need to do, or live out your dreams or your career goals, or have the relationships that you want. Then you start to feel resentful, tired, bad, guilty. And then you're aware of like, well, I'm the only one one of the few sometimes that can actually help my family, then why am I not helping them? Like, I feel like I'm a bad person. Then we go back to the same cycle of then repaying, self-sacrificing. Then we have mixed emotions. Then we go back again to just repaying and going through this whole cycle because we just are doing it habitually. Now, there is a way to break the pattern, right? We can put pauses in these things, and that's what we're going to talk about in the next episode. But there are ways to slow down the cycle. There are ways to reduce the intensity of being in each cycle, like the self-sacrifice or the repay. There's a way to take care of ourselves when we're in the mixed emotions that I want to talk to you about in our next episode, because I've been there. I know it is possible, and I've helped a lot of clients through this. And it's also possible for you, where you could have this, you could still repay in whatever ways you want, but in a way that works for you. That's the important part. Sometimes I think we're just stuck in this cycle and we just keep going and going and going without really thinking, is this working for me? Is this how I want to show up? Is this what I want my relationships to be like, right? Because actually it ends up ruining relationships a little bit, or it's not as strong as they could be because there's all this other pent up feelings that are not being addressed. So that's the repay cycle. That's the 4 phases that we go through: awareness, repay, self-sacrifice, mixed emotions. Then we go back to awareness and the cycle restarts. Again, there's a way to reduce this, to move through this better in a way that works for you. And if you want, I have a PDF version of this with all the information of the little explanation. If you're more of a visual person, or if you want to have this just to look at, you can go to my show notes, go to my website, and I can get you the PDF emailed, and you can see how this all lands with you before we talk in our next episode on what to do about it. Okay, thanks so much for listening, and I will talk to you on the next episode. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. I appreciate you being here. Just as a reminder, all information on this is intended to be informational and educational only. Although I am a licensed therapist, I am not your therapist. If you are looking for any medical or mental health services, please reach out to providers local to your area and seek out information that is specific for you. This information is not intended to replace any medical or mental health services that you may benefit from. And I hope that you enjoyed the information that was provided on the show today, and I'll see you on the next episode.